The Bad Batch Episode 3 Replacements. So this episode, I would say, definitely picks up where mostly the first episode left off, actually, as far as like the darker tone and things like that. They definitely blend in a little bit of episode 2 with some of the stuff from Omega. But I liked it. I thought it was definitely a good episode. We got to see literally the first Stormtroopers, and that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, one of the guys, he wanted to do his own thing. He talked a little too much, and Crosshair was like, okay. And he just shot him. And I was like, I thought that was going to happen. Like, he was talking, it was like, he was literally doing exactly what Hunter did. It was like, hey, we're not executioners. These people are not soldiers. They're civilians. And it's like, well, good soldiers follow orders. So we got to see our first 3 Stormtroopers. They, of course, were decked out in the gray. We got to see, technically speaking, our first Incinerator Trooper as well, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Like, they just strolled in. It was like, this person's sniping. This person's got like the long rifle. I don't really know the names of the weapons and everything. And then this person decided, I'm just going to come in with the flamethrower. Why not? That's what I want to do. So, first Incinerator Trooper. Literally in the first Stormtrooper mission. So I like what they did with it. I thought that was definitely a good part of the episode. I like the other half of the episode as well, where we actually have the Bad Batch and Omega, and they're going through, and this was where they had, of course, like I said, some of the more lighthearted stuff from the last episode, which is basically the overarching story of this season, which is Hunter and Omega having that father-daughter relationship. They seem like they were teasing, by the way, the whole element of, like, Wrecker is like, oh, he hit his head, and he was like, oh, my head really hurts. I'm like, that could be nothing. It could have been a mess with our heads. It could have just been like, oh, he hit his head really hard. And that's actually what happened. And so that was it. His head hurt, and then it didn't by the end of the episode. But then there's also that thing where it's like, oh, he hit his head a little too hard. And then, brainwaves are a little bit different, and that inhibitor chip is suddenly kicking in. And I was just like, they're gonna have to kill Wrecker. I was like, just by the end of the episode, I was just like, so they gotta kill Wrecker, right? Like that really sucks. But we'll see. We have to wait, and if they keep touching on that. Of course, if he's like, oh, my head still kind of hurts a little, game over. That's pretty much, that's guaranteed. Like, and they know that. So they might save that for a few episodes where just out of nowhere, they'll just be, doing their mission or whatever. And then he'll just be like, man, my head's been hurting, ever since we had that crash landing, my head's still just, like, kind of been hurting, like, just a little bit. Like, not a ton, but it's still just been like this little twinge. He probably won't say twinge. I don't think he's smart enough for that. But, something small. So we'll have to wait and see. But this was either nothing, and it was just to mess with us, just to have this moment where everybody's like, predicting and theorizing, or it's an actual thing. So we'll have to wait. Like I said, they'll probably save it for a little bit and just be like, oh yeah, I didn't mention it because it wasn't worth mentioning because I didn't want to whine the whole time. But he keeps, if he brings it up somewhere down the line, like, yeah, my head's just still been hurt ever since that crash landing, Wrecker has to die. And that's unfortunate. But that's on them if they decide to do it that way. But for now, his head just hurt. He hit his head really hard as they were having a crash landing. He thought they were going to die and everything. So it was like he hit his head and it hurt for a little. And it's fine. So we'll see what happens. But I still enjoy what they did. We had them, have Hunter and Omega. They kind of go out and do their dynamic duo sort of thing once again. And this is really like the only thing that I don't like so far. And I hope they just don't do it do it a ton. They've done it literally 2 episodes in a row, and that's the only reason I'm like, I hope this doesn't happen all the freaking time. But Hunter was like, okay, you hit your head. He knows that Echo and Tech are not really the combat folks, and it's like, look, all I have to do is hunt this thing down and get the piece back. Very simple. Wrecker, you hit your head, you're staying here. Wrecker's like, oh, my head really hurts, and he's like, that's why you're staying here. Like, he repeats it. And then Omega's like, well, I'll go, and he's like, no, the thing's out there, it could be dangerous. And she's like, well, I'm a part of the team, right? And he's just like, yeah, you are. Okay, kid, let's go. And I'm like, what he could have said was, you are, and much like the same part of the team that Wrecker is on right here, you're staying on the ship. That's all he had to do was say that. Like, he literally just told Wrecker to stay, and he is their actual powerhouse tank. And it was because he hit his head. But he was like, okay, because she's, she wants to be a part of the team, and I understand that. But I think there has to be a point, and I'm sure they'll get there. Eventually, they'll have, like, a certain point where she's like, well, I want to come along, and he's going to be like, no. He's going to flat out have to say no. And the only reason I give him, like, a slight okay for this, even though I'm just like, you told Wrecker no because he had a bit of a headache, and now you're telling Omega, even though she technically doesn't really have many skills, like, she did that really crazy shot, but other than that, it's like, that's a bit risky. So the only reason I slightly give it a pass is because he was comfortable enough to go by himself, so clearly he's comfortable enough to be like, alright, I can protect her as long as she's close to me, no big deal. But still, as a soldier, it's kind of just like, I mean, I guess if he was just a normal clone, he wouldn't be able to kind of deviate from the typical plan where it's like, sure, because any normal clone I think would have been like, no, that's too dangerous. You're a liability. You stay here. I'm gonna go and everything's fine. And of course, him being different, that's probably what allowed him to do that. And naturally, they wrote that into the story because I was like, okay, if he's allowing her to go, I guarantee, just like in the last episode, something's gonna happen, and only Omega can solve this problem, and that's exactly what they did. In the last episode, she was on the ship, and they didn't know, and because she was on the ship, they thought it was a screw up, but that is what allowed them to actually succeed because she was small enough to actually sneak past everybody. And then in this episode, of course, Hunter gets tackled, his gas mask falls off, she's able to get it back on him, but he's still unconscious, and she's like, okay, well, I have to take his blaster. I have to take the light, and I got to go find this piece. And so, of course, she succeeds. And so that was meant to be her journey. But it was just like, I knew that was going to happen because that's what they did literally in the last episode, where it was like, something she wasn't supposed to do, she did. And then she was the reason that they succeeded. And that's kind of a normal storytelling thing. The only issue is that she's literally the only person they can do that with. Like, if Echo went, I'd be like, yeah, Echo would succeed. Like, if Hunter got knocked out, okay, it's a little tougher for Echo. But he's Echo. Like, we've seen what he can do. Like, he's a trained clone. Like, he'll be fine. But when it's Omega, it's just like, well, of course, something bad is going to happen, and only she'll be able to do it. When it's two people that are actually capable, there's a bit of mystery. Like, oh, well, will they simply succeed? Will they get surrounded? Is something else going to happen? Will they get split up, and then they both have to survive individually? Who knows? And they could have done that as well, which I would have preferred. I mean, honestly, the main reason I have an issue with it is because I knew it was going to go this way, where it was like, they're going to do what they did in the last episode, where technically her being the anomaly, whereas like, oh, that's kind of the liability within like this grand scheme of a plan. She'll be, that anomaly, which would typically be like, oh, that's the problem. She was the solution instead. And I was like, they're gonna do that again, and that's exactly what they did. So that was like the only thing where I was like, I hope they don't do that too much. Where they just have random missions and she's just like, okay. Well, first off, like I said, the fact that she can just be like, I'm a part of the team though now, and he's just like, okay. I was like, you just told Wrecker because he had a headache. He's like a literal tank. Like, he pulled a magnetic piece, that was attached to the ship. He pulled it with his bare hands and got it to like break off. And you said no because he had a headache. But it was like, well, she is a part of the team, I guess so. So it's just like slightly weird. That's like the only thing where I'm just like, it's just like a little much, like just a touch too much, and that's about it. But other than that, it was great. I still enjoyed the episode. Of course, she ends up finding the solution. It's like, okay, well, she has the flashlight. I guess the thing didn't absorb all of the power from we'll just go with battery because I forgot the name that they gave it. But I guess it didn't absorb all of the power from that. So she was able to, figure it out. She was like, oh, well, I have this flashlight. It's got power. She clicks it on, tosses it. She gets the battery. She takes off. And everything's good. They get back to the ship and they leave. They don't even reference Wrecker having a headache by the end of the episode because I thought that's what they were going to do, just to do like a final little hint and be like, yeah, my head's still hurting or whatever. But they didn't do that. He made her a bedroom, and that was cute. That was a nice little moment. And she's like, able to enjoy it. He gave her his doll that he had in the first episode. And that was cool. So she has, I believe it's the gunner spot, if I'm not mistaken, because there was an actual window there. I didn't realize that ship even had a gunner position, but I guess it does make sense. I feel like every ship has that, honestly, in Star Wars, so I guess I should have assumed. But he showed it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. She has her own little spot and everything. So that was nice. They do their mission. They kind of take off, and it's just her being able to succeed where, Hunter got knocked out. I can't really say he failed. It was kind of just like, he got knocked out. Technically, I guess he did. But she was able to succeed, get the battery, everything was cool, and she kind of proved herself useful. And then Wrecker, gave her a little spot to sleep where it's like, you have your own room, and she never had that before. So it was just another little thing to make her, feel like she has a home, has her own home. So I thought that was cool. And then, of course, the Stormtrooper stuff was absolutely amazing. The Kaminoans, I guess is how you say it. Oh, who knows what that's leading to, because they're like, oh man, they're trying to get rid of our clones, and we're gonna be poor if they do that. But we also need like, they was talking about the anomaly, and I assumed that they were talking about Omega, but I guess it would be just any of the Bad Batch. But they also technically have Crosshair, so, and that's kind of iffy. It depends on whether or not they actually get time away from this new admiral. I forgot his name, of course. I suck with names, but it is what it is. So we'll see what happens there. I like that concept, and I like the fact that they're doing a lot with them. Like, clearly they helped Omega escape with the Bad Batch because they had some concept of being like, if we help them escape, then we have a way to get them back. Like, we will get them back. We have all we need is one. We need one of them to get their DNA, and maybe they need the DNA of one of the other clones. Someone from the Bad Batch that wasn't like Crosshair, where he was even somewhat affected. They need someone that was like completely unaffected, and it seems like that's what they're working on. And if not, then they were definitely talking about Omega, which no answers there. They didn't give any clues or anything like that. It was just it's an anomaly of a situation right now, because we got the Empire coming in. They want us to train normal humans and regular soldiers with our clones, and of course, the plan succeeds. They of course don't know why that one guy ended up dying off, but it's like, well, the plan succeeded where the clones failed. So if we have loyal people, which once again they are just banging it out like, okay, we need New Republic credits. We need to know who everybody is. We need to get soldiers, like human soldiers instead of clone soldiers, so that we know no matter what happens, we can have people who choose to join us, which means that they will do anything that we need them to do. It won't be a defect. We won't have defects, because anyone that joins in will simply stay here, which doesn't happen, obviously. I mean, we've seen that not only in the movies, but that's a part of Star Wars Rebels as well. It's like, people do join, and then they're like, this was bad. This was a bad idea. I'm an asshole, and then they leave. So it's not 100%. It doesn't really matter if it was clones or humans. It's not 100% like, yeah, they joined up on purpose, and so they'll stay with us forever. It's like, sometimes people do things, and then they're like, oh no, I'm the bad guy. Like, it happens. It's literally a part of the sequel trilogy. They have it as one of the characters in Star Wars Rebels. Like, that's her whole storyline, is like the tragedy she feels from having been a part of the Empire and stuff like that. So it's not 100%, but that was their mindset, where it was like, oh, this one mission succeeded where the clones failed, which is the greatest. That's another thing which I always thought was kind of funny. Even in the first episode, this random anomaly, like, they tell him, the Bad Batch is very rare. Like, they are technically defected and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, well, these humans succeeded where they failed. I'm like, but if you sent in other clones that were not like that, that wouldn't have happened. You probably would have needed, like, tougher clones. You probably couldn't send in like a regular, just a rag, like a clean suit, brand new, spanking new clone. Maybe that would have failed compared to some people who are with the rebellion and they've been kind of dealing with this and expecting things to happen. But that was like one little test. You had the anomalies to do the test. Like, have some regular people do it and be like, oh yeah. But it was about money anyway, so I think it was pretty quick. It was like, clearly Grand Moff Tarkin was like, look, I don't want to be spending all this stuff in money. We're trying to get them galactic credits, and we're not trying to give any to you. So he wanted this anyway. So it was, I don't think it would have mattered. And it was just like, all right, well, the best clones you have, if they failed, that was kind of like, well, that's it for me. I don't, we're wasting our effing money. So we're just going to get soldiers, normal human recruits. So I feel like that's another part of it, because he was it was just like, you got infinite clones. That's like the smartest thing ever. And he was just like, I just don't want to spend the money on it. He's kind of just being cheap, in all honesty. They're just being cheap. And so, like I said, they did their test. Technically, it passed. And they killed off all those people, civilians and all. And then it's like, okay, well, this is where we go from here. We have our Stormtroopers. I'm curious if they're going to have, like, the official name. I feel like by the end of the series, they're definitely going to say the name. They're going to be like, we have our clone troopers. What do we call this new batch? Probably won't say new batch. But they'll just have some dramatic moment, and they'll zoom in on the new guy's face, and they'll be like, Stormtroopers. They'll have some moment where they figure out the name. But I liked it. I thought it was definitely cool. We got to actually see them. Their helmets, they are like Stormtroopers. They have the official Stormtrooper helmet and everything. The only thing was that the characters were in gray. And I love how they did that, because we had the clone troopers. Then we had Crosshair. When he switched, his outfit, his helmet was definitely very akin to classic Stormtroopers. And then these characters came in, and they were actual Stormtroopers. It was just in gray instead of the full-on white. And I was like, that's actually a really cool. It's like, because there's so many different helmets in Star Wars. Like, even the clones have different helmets. They have like their early era clone helmets where it was like the really thin visors and stuff, and now we have the current era clone helmets. And then we have like that really in between, like what Crosshair has with his helmet, where it's like, oh, that looks just like the Stormtrooper helmet, but it had like more lines. I think it was like around the mouth. And now we have like, these specific characters in this episode. You can't really see it, but you got the First Order back there. And the helmet just changed so much throughout all of Star Wars. But I like how they did that. It was very subtle, because I noticed it in the first one with Crosshair. I was like, oh, his helmet is very close to classic Stormtrooper. And then this episode, straight up Stormtroopers. They were just kind of like the ninja version. So I loved it. I thought that was very cool. I like getting to see that. I'm excited to see how that progresses with these. I guess there's only 3 humans now. But with our first 3 Stormtroopers and then Crosshair as their commander, how that's going to work with him leading this team. And then I'm assuming at some point, I knew this from the beginning, I was like, well, if he's not dead in the first episode, he's going to be chasing down the Bad Batch. So I'm excited to see that. They're going to have Stormtroopers versus clones. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I think that has a lot of potential. We have a ton of episodes left, so I'm looking forward to how it happens. But I think this was definitely a good episode. I know a lot of people were kind of iffy about episode 2 because it just seemed like the really slow pace, like, oh, it's kind of the pseudo kitty episode. And it was really the introduction to that whole family dynamic and everything. But this one, I think they took it to a decent level where it was like, okay, it was, especially considering half the episode was like the Stormtrooper stuff, so that was super entertaining. And then the other half was like our overarching story with, this new family dynamic. But I think they did a good job with it. I don't think it was like super cheesy or any annoying or anything like that. And I didn't find it that way in the last episode either, but this one I enjoyed, except for, like I said, it was just like, I'm a part of the team too. And it's like, so is Wrecker, but he's staying here. But aside from that, which I really do hope that that's not how they continue doing that. I hope they just find better ways to have her character do things. Like, maybe she does stay home or, stay in the ship, and then they just get attacked. The ship gets attacked, and she just has to do something. It's like, okay, at least it wasn't because she was just like, but I'm a part of the team. And it's like, okay, I'm going to totally ignore basic soldier logic and be like, sure, you're a part of the team, and that makes you sad, so come on. I hope they don't do that all the time. I don't think they will. I have faith in Dave Filoni and the writing of the show. But they did it 2 times in a row, and I was like, that kind of sucks that they literally did it 2 times in a row, where her being like the seemingly bad part of the plan was the reason that the plan actually succeeded. So I'm like, okay, well, that's twice and in a row. So it has to be done, at least for a while. It has to be done at least for like a couple of episodes. They can't do that again. But I have faith. I'm still excited. I think this was a really good episode. I'm super excited for this Stormtrooper stuff. Like, I was hoping we'd get to Crosshair again, so I was happy to see him. And just, that's definitely like the darker side of the story. And I'm just waiting. I know a couple episodes in, they're going to be like, okay, let's give them a real test, the real Stormtrooper test. Crosshair, take your team and find the Bad Batch. And that's what I'm waiting for. That's all I'm waiting for right now. So we shall see that and who the F Omega is a clone of. Wow, I actually said Omega. Omega is a clone of. She got me. But I would love to know your thoughts on this episode, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.